Think of a man who made a kingdom out of rust and dust, only to see it fall apart because of the decisions he made. Drew Pritchard, the larger-than-life star of the television show Salvage Hunters, did the unimaginable in the spring of 2024. He sold all of his valuable relics, tools, and trinkets that he had acquired over the years. Gone are the fairground boat that entertained generations, the old placards that told stories of distant villages, and even pieces that were stolen from Buckingham Palace. The sale of 620 items brought in more than $800,000. It wasn't the huge number that hurt his fans, it was the deep sense of loss that was happening all throughout the world. This wasn't a smart business move or a happy ending. It seemed like giving up a last, painful goodbye. As the hammer dropped on the last property in that quiet auction hall, millions of people across the world witnessed a legend fall apart. News anchors highlighted clips of Drew's victories, such when he waded through falling barns and pulled a century-old fireplace mantle from a wrecking ball. Then they showed him nodding through tears as he gave up each piece. To understand how a youngster who used to steal kingdoms from scraps ended up selling his soul, we need to go back to a cold, wet winter in Conwy, North Wales, in 1970. Drew had a hard life from the start. His parents had a small corner store that barely made ends meet in a community where coal fireplaces were a luxury and money was always tight. He saw value in things that were thrown away even before he could ride a bike: bottle caps as money, damaged toys as canvases for fixing, and scrap heaps on the side of the road as treasure troves. Drew's young mind was full of possibilities as he prowled flea markets and dumps while other kids chased cricket balls over slate-paved streets. People in the neighborhood talked about the strange youngster who was obsessed with rubbish, but nothing could stop him from being interested. He had already played with fire by the time he was 10. One afternoon, a thoughtless move amid a huge pile of rusty iron crushed a beam against his leg. He got away with a damaged wrist, but that near burial only made his passion stronger. Pictures from that year show a little youngster holding a helmet from World War II that he found under months of dirt. His grin was as wild as the stories his grandfather, a World War II veteran, would later recount. Drew's grandfather told him stories of secret bunkers and relics that had been brought in. These stories became Drew's guiding mythology, hidden worlds waiting to be found. At home, things were hard in a different way. His father was a talented sign painter who used real gold leaf on barboards, but he had tremors from being around lead all the time. Drew, who was 8 years old, witnessed those hands shake and learned that beauty often comes at a cost. By the time he was 12, he was stealing tools from his father's workshop to fix broken toys and old furniture. He breathed in fumes without knowing how much they would cost, and more than once he woke up choking on poisonous varnish. He secretly developed a junkyard in his backyard out of old bike parts and rusty engine parts until his neighbors complained about the noise and rodents. Drew left school at 16 since it was more like a prison than a safe place. He got an apprenticeship at a car repair garage in Llandudno. He only made $2 an hour, but he found his purpose in that small workshop. Every time he mended a dented Jaguar hood, sparks flew through the dusty air, and the smell of oil and metal quickly became familiar. He got a jagged scar on his hand from a bad weld in his first week. It will always be a sign of sacrifice and determination. He showed himself that he could bring life back to old machines by restoring each bumper and polishing each chrome fin. But the deals that happened in the garage tested his morals. When he was 19, police raided and took $10,000 worth of stolen parts. This caused the gang to break up because of suspicions. Drew knew that shady business may get in the way of his rescue efforts. It was a turning point for him. He promised to develop something of his own that wasn't affected by other people's mistakes. He saved enough money to buy the right tools by using the money he made from weekend flea market mistakes and a few honest restorations. Weeks later, he left the garage for good, ready to make his own way. Drew rented a small store on Conwy's High Street when he was 18. His first sale, there was an old Victorian gas light that had been left there. He polished it till the brass parts shone like new. He purchased $50 for it and sold it for 3 times that amount. This was a bold deal that shocked local dealers. Then a flood hit the town, and while neighbors mourned their submerged goods, Drew dove in to save old signs and furniture from the rising water. He returned the pieces he saved to shopkeepers, making money and becoming a hero. Conwy had found its king of salvage. By the time Drew was 14, his dreams had extended far beyond small flea markets and junkyards. Every morning after class at Conway High, he would sneak away to the town's old port docks, where shipping containers heaped up like a fortress of hidden treasures. He knew when guards were on patrol and how to get around the gates. He came out with old things that merchants had left behind, such fancy machine components, broken porcelain, and even pieces of industrial signs. One frigid afternoon, he snuck onto a quiet freighter and stole a brass compass from the captain's chest. He then sold it for the same amount of money he would have made in a month. That one big win boosted both his money account and his reputation among local collectors, who quickly learned that the persistent teenage scrounger was a force to be reckoned with. He still only made a little money each week at the auto restoration shop in Llandudno, so he used every free time to look for new places to go. He found old mansions that were going to be torn down along meandering country roads. He saved stained glass windows from being broken, learned the trade of antique merchants on his own, and made deals with demolition teams who needed extra money. He was able to see a centuries-old fireplace mantel behind layers of soot and flaking paint because he had a strong eye for hidden value. He wrenched it loose, hired a local van service, and took it to a buyer in Cardiff, who was amazed by the mantel's beautiful carvings. Even though he was getting more and more successful, the continual stress started to get to him. He had to do coursework that he didn't care about, work shifts in the afternoon mending rusting fenders, and brave salvage runs into barns that were half collapsed. His health got worse, he got pneumonia from inhaling in particles from old paint, and more than once he almost got seriously hurt when corroded beams gave way under his feet. He still wouldn't quit, though. Every scratch and fever was a badge of honor, proof that his aspirations were worth the trouble. Drew started his own antique and salvage business when he was 18 and had finished his formal education. He turned a small, old butcher store on High Street into a venue to show off his findings, such old luggage, dusty ship lanterns, reclaimed barn timbers, and Brunswick billiard tables he got from closed pubs. People from the area filled his shelves and paid top dollar for things they never thought they would be able to find. Over the next 2 years, people in South Wales heard about the growing salvage king. He placed small advertising in historical periodicals and joined antique dealer groups, which helped him make connections that would eventually help him pay for his most risky trips. Next came the internet. As a consumer in 2003, Drew was looking through online forums when he noticed that collectors around the world were paying a lot of money for rare items. He made his first eBay listing, a tarnished nautical sextant that a Welsh merchant marine captain used to use. He put up extensive pictures and a well-researched story about where the item came from. To his surprise, the bidding went much over what local dealers were asking for, and the final offer came from a UK collector who was willing to spend 6 times what he thought it would be worth. He was so happy with that success that he bought professional photographic gear, made a basic website, and built up an online presence with detailed descriptions and honest anecdotes about how he salvaged things. His market was no longer limited to county lines, it now stretched from New York to Tokyo. Then the media paid attention. One morning, a tiny regional television crew showed up at his shop without warning to film a part for a show on heritage. As he worked on a valuable cast iron radiator that had been taken from an Edwardian mansion, cameras clicked. He talked passionately about how important it is to keep industrial heritage alive, which got people interested in his cause. Traffic to his website doubled overnight after the short show. Museums, private collectors, and interested amateurs sent in a lot of emails. People from all over the UK offered to work together on salvaging initiatives. In 2011, a big production company made him an offer he couldn't refuse: host a whole series on his salvage adventures. Drew signed a multi-season contract with a national network, and now he was in front of bright studio lights and behind the lens of camera crews that moved around. The show's formula included high-stakes auctions, tense explorations of abandoned places, and moments of skillful negotiating. People loved every episode because he was so good at mechanics, knew a lot about history, and had great conversations with his co-workers. The show's ratings went through the roof, reaching millions, and Drew's name became linked with British salvage exploits. But being famous had hidden price. Strict filming schedules left little time for family, and connections with friends and family suffered. Instead of weekend digs with friends, they had to travel across the country on production schedules. He took a lot of heat from supporters who looked at every mistake and made small ones into big scandals. One week, tabloids called him the Prince of Rust, and the next, they called him Puppet Master. But the brilliant lights of fame can throw the deepest shadows. By 2013, Salvage Hunters had aired its 100th episode, and Drew was on a pedestal that few people could have imagined. Millions of people saw him walk through disintegrating estates, talk to demolition crews, and unearth dramatic things like a long-lost stained glass window from a destroyed Victorian chapel. But even if he was successful, Drew was always tired. He had to cope with traveling across the country, filming schedules that never stopped, sponsorship deals to work out, and the pressure to make every new discovery better than the last. Production demands took over weekends that used to be for family getaways and quiet home improvement projects. His wife Rebecca and their kids only saw him in short bursts, a narrated piece here, a pre-recorded portion there, but never the father and husband who used to host Sunday dinners at their church home. The constant pace wore them down. Drew started to feel the weight of every camera lens pointing at him between frantic salvage hunts and late-night editing sessions. He missed the closeness of working with his hands, the gratifying rhythm of sanding a surface by lamplight, and the soft glow of a restored lamp warming a quiet room. Instead, he had to deal with the bright lights in the studio, the pressure to come up with exciting hooks for each episode, and the growing dread that his passion had turned into just another way for people to have fun. The ratings went through the roof, but every percentage point felt like a nail in the coffin of the calm craftsman he used to be. Then, in early 2015, the border between what people saw on television and what was real got blurry in a way that no one saw coming. Drew met Amanda Thomas, a charming merchant with a sharp eye and quick humor, during a busy antique fair in Manchester. What started as a polite exchange of salvage tips and whispers about rare objects quickly became into hidden meetings, whispered discussions in empty exhibition aisles, texts full of love at night, and secret dinners after the throng had gone home. The affair grew slowly but strongly, propelled by the thrill of danger in secret. There were rumors going around among dealers, and within weeks, Rebecca heard them. In a little Welsh community where everyone knew everyone, privacy disappeared abruptly. The fight was as public as his TV shows. In January 2015, a fight at Conway's Liverpool Arms late at night concluded with security guards pulling Drew outside while a shocked crowd watched. Under the town's pub watch program, local patrols stopped him from going to 44 pubs, which meant he couldn't go back to the community he had saved many times. Tabloids happily called him names like betrayer and fallen hero. On social media, hashtags like #SalvageGate and #RustBetrayal split admirers into two groups. Some supported his right to private folly, others criticized him as a hypocrite whose personal shortcomings rendered his on-screen moralizing hollow. After that, every show had an undercurrent of controversy, making it hard for production staff to deal with contrived drama and real-life fallout. By the end of 2017, the stress had broken Drew's marriage beyond repair. He and Rebecca said they had irreconcilable differences in a joint statement that used the neutral language of legal separation. Behind closed doors, talks about assets went nasty. Their chapel house, which used to be a place where they could share their aspirations, turned into a courtroom where pictures of stained glass windows and brass chandeliers were torn apart like trophies. The custody arrangements for their kids made the news, which was a sign of a family falling apart under the harsh light of celebrity. Drew stared with empty eyes as the life he had made fell apart around him. It was as ironic as any broken treasure he had seen. But Drew was tough as nails. He turned his sadness into action, trying to find forgiveness via the art that had made him who he was. He wrote a biography called Salvaging Secrets in 2018 that took off the shiny surface of television fame and showed the gritty roughness underneath. Readers loved his stories about dangerous digs, close calls with unstable buildings, and hard-won lessons about honesty and taking care of things. The book quickly became a bestseller, making $50,000 in its first month. After that, there were spin-off offers like Classic Cars with Pritchard and Salvage Hunters, Global Expeditions, each promising exciting places and big bids. But Drew wasn't sure. The memoir's popularity reminded him of why he fell in love with salvaging in the first place, the magic of turning something ugly into something beautiful and the delight of finding something new without the show. In the years that followed, the Conway showroom that enthusiasts used to visit grew silent. Tourism boards said that fewer people were coming through. He shuttered the doors with no fanfare and went back to a Georgian home in Bath that he had bought during a brief high point. Even there, ghosts from his past were there. Renovations to the old property uncovered concealed rot and structural deterioration that ate up funds and taxed people's patience. He had to pay for costly repairs to the plumbing and electrical systems, and each unforeseen expenditure reminded him that restoration is never done and is full of problems. Then, in early 2024, Drew made a choice that would change the way people remember him. As news of a final auction spread, collectors rushed to get seats at the famous London auction house for one last chance to bid on artifacts he had collected for decades. The catalogue had more than 600 items, including a circus boat from the 1930s, a collection of old pub signs from small-town Britain, and even pieces that were said to have been used to decorate Buckingham Palace. As the gavel fell on each item, prices shot up into the tens of thousands, a sign of his renown and the shine of scarcity that comes with any last chance. But behind the scenes, Drew watched each transaction with a mix of pride and deep sadness. He realized that each lot was more than just a sale, it was the end of a chapter in his life that he could never get back. The last gavel dropped on a clear afternoon, and for a minute, the hall was completely still. That day, more than $800,000 changed hands, but the real cost was in memories. One by one, they were sold, and the sound of laughing in his studio was replaced by silence. Fans at home saw a man say goodbye to things he loved as much as they did. They sent each other sad messages on social media and posted pictures of their own treasured heirlooms with captions like, "In memory of the days when every rusted hinge held a story." As the lights went out in that famous auction room, it was clear that Drew's greatest find would no longer be a piece of history hidden in a barn. It would be the moment he realized what really mattered when he was trying to save his own life. After the last auction, Drew's world was silent for a few weeks. The equipment he used to use with confidence were now sitting in dusty racks, and every empty display shelf felt like a blank canvas with no purpose. He walked through the echoing corridors of his Bath townhouse, where memories of past exploits flashed behind each shuttered window. He faced a scary question: who was he when faces and fortunes no longer measured his worth? He didn't have the sound of the gavel to guide him. Friends and old co-workers gave him sympathetic smiles and vague offers to help him with new salvage employment, but he wasn't sure. The blinding glare of prior spotlight burns was too fresh to go back to without a guiding flame of anything real. On a dreary morning, he felt driven to the workshop in the back of the home. It was a little room where he had taped many TV shows and chased after big auctions. The workbench still had scratches and oil stains on it, which were signs of years of quick fixes. He found an old pair of pliers and realized that restoring things felt like coming home. He worked on a project that was only half finished, the 1920s train lamp that had first sparked his interest. The fractured globe and corroded fittings looked at him like silent spectators pleading for a new start. He carefully cleaned the metal body, replaced the old, brittle wiring, and put on a new coat of lacquer. The lamp's amber brightness came back, and so did a long-buried happiness. This spark was softer than the rush of auctions, but it had a warmth that fame and money couldn't give. He began with tiny things. Every day, he fixed one thing and wrote down what he did in a basic journal. One day he cleaned up a broken brass compass, and the next day he rehung a set of stained glass slats. He felt a small sense of victory with each task he finished, the kind that builds up slowly instead of bursting out while the cameras are on. A few former co-workers heard that Drew was back at the bench, not as a celebrity hired to promote auctions, but as a craftsman rediscovering the art of salvaging. Emails came in from people I didn't know, hobbyists with antiques that were gathering dust and museum curators with too many archives asking for help. He thought about it and gave him tips that he had kept secret from others in the past. His inbox became a record of shared knowledge, an unexpected way to see how much he really helped the group. Because of that growing connection, he held an informal get-together in his backyard studio. A dozen local craftsmen, students, and longtime enthusiasts gathered around rough-hewn benches, each with a piece that needed some work. A retired millworker brought a rusty water valve that used to control turbines, while an amateur historian brought shoe molds from a World War I factory. Drew showed them how to clean, stabilize, and complete things, and he was amazed at how their eyes lighted up as they felt the same joy he had followed all his life. There was no filming or broadcasting that afternoon. There was no producer to ask for drama or a cameraman to look for shocking revelations. Instead, it was full of real inquiry, hands-on discovery, and the simple joy of working together for a common goal. It reminded Drew that the real power of salvage is in working together, not in conquering alone. Drew was inspired to come up with a radical new plan, a community workshop he called the Rescue Room. He saw huge work tables under skylights, walls of tools filled with old hammers and brushes, and cabinets full of pieces that had been given from sites in the area. He wrote a proposal that included free weekend lessons for families, advanced courses for apprentices, and special sessions for local schools. He used the money he made from selling books and a few private donors he contacted directly to rent a small warehouse near Bath City Center. He obtained a good deal on rent in exchange for letting neighbors come over and look at restored pieces and learn about the history of the area on certain days. One rule guided every detail: accessibility. Drew's nerves fluttered when the doors to the warehouse opened for the public event. He stood inside the room, where the afternoon sun shone through skylights and lit up pallets of reclaimed wood, samples of vintage tile, and a row of maritime instruments on plinths. Families, students, and retired fans who were interested came in slowly, following painted signs and the smell of linseed oil. Drew showed people how to clean brass without using harsh chemicals, how to remove rust without ruining the antique patina, and how to find out where an old piece came from. Kids brushed their small hands on rough metal, older people exchanged notes about ship lanterns from the Gulf War, and local reporters clipped notebook pages for a weekend story. The communal buzz of discovery felt like victory, a chorus of restored stories singing in unison together. After that first accomplishment, Drew felt something he hadn't felt in years: the peaceful satisfaction of earnest restoration, without the stress of cameras and auction houses. Every morning, he unlocked the doors to the warehouse and saw long benches filled with refurbished wood, brass fixtures, and broken porcelain pieces. Sunlight coming through the steel-framed windows caught the dust motes that were spinning around and gave the room a holy shine. He saw a retired welder straighten up a bent iron railing while a teenage apprentice mixed paint recipes that had been around for hundreds of years. That slow-moving excitement reminded him of why he loved Salvage in the first place: it brought people together via shared knowledge and goals. Requests came in from all over the place. A young designer from London hired him to fix up an old industrial pulley for a loft installation, and a local historical group asked him to restore a set of fancy door hinges from a mansion that had been torn down. Drew faced each problem with new energy. He showed volunteers how to tell the difference between natural patina and corrosive staining, how to lubricate moving components without losing their character, and how to learn about the history of an item through historical ledgers and oral history. He chuckled with other craftsmen over mismatched bolts and hailed tiny wins, like the first time a rebuilt pulley worked easily after being rusted for decades. As things started to pick up speed, Drew went to the city council with a daring idea: turn a rundown railway depot near Bath into a permanent center for community-led restoration projects. He imagined workstations under skylights, spaces for presenting stories with slideshows of local history, and a library full of dusty archive boxes and salvaging manuals. It took weeks of negotiations, full of red tape and budget disagreements, but his passionate speeches won over authorities who were unsure. He stressed that the project will protect cultural artifacts, provide jobs for apprentices, bring in more tourists, and make people proud of their city. In the end, the council gave him money to help pay for rent and seed money, which was the first big growth of the rescue room. Drew was busy getting ready for the grand opening. He oversaw the installation of ventilation systems that were safe for removing lead-based paint, mapped out electrical circuits for specialized tools, and put together exhibits that showed off some of the most impressive restorations, like a salvaged pub sign from 1924, a mechanized automaton figure from an Edwardian fairground, and a broken oil lamp that used to light a miner's lodge. He contacted former co-workers in TV to film short, unscripted parts that showed hands-on approaches without using sensationalized narration. He merely asked for honesty: portray the mess, the problems, and the surprises that come with the job. The shed was full with life on the first day. Families brought heirlooms like rusty rifle barrels, broken quilt frames, and tarnished candelabra in cardboard boxes to share stories with volunteer experts. A school in the area planned a field trip where pupils used magnifying glasses to measure the grains of exotic wood and drew glaze patterns on broken porcelain shards. Retired people from adjacent villages gathered around a huge exhibition of grain silo gears, remembering summers spent looking for scrap metal. There were workshops in every corner, from basic sanding technique classes to sophisticated metal arc welding classes. The sound of people talking mixed with the sound of hammers hitting things and air compressors hissing, making it sound like a symphony of revival. Drew felt a peace that had been hard to find for a long time. He would spend his afternoons drinking tea with trainees and talking honestly about his own mistakes. He would also remind them that failure can educate them more than success ever could. When the fragile corkscrew hinge broke under pressure, he didn't yell at the volunteer. Instead, he taught them how to make a new one out of scrap metal and told them to try new things. He knew that being a mentor was his true calling, and that passing on knowledge would be the lasting legacy he had always wanted. There would never be a gavel that could replace the subtle passing on of ability and shaping of the future. The shed became a landmark for the area within a few months. With the help of crowdfunding, Drew and his team were able to buy a mobile outreach van full of tools and safety clothing. This allowed them to hold pop-up workshops in rural areas. He made salvage caravans that went to empty barns, county fairs, and college campuses. They invited kids to go on field trips under tarps and in the rusty metal frames of ancient grain elevators. Every weekend, artists from outside of Bath came together for a workshop. A timber framer taught how to make mortise and tenon joints, a glassblower showed how to make new panes in a furnace, and an archivist shared how to keep paper records safe. This successful network changed the way people think about Drew's legacy. His name was no longer associated with short-lived popularity on TV or exciting auctions. Instead, it grew to mean giving people control, protecting the environment, and the idea that every object has a narrative that needs to be saved. As the sun rose on another busy morning at the rescue room, Drew stopped at the door and took in the smells of oak dust and machine oil. He also listened to the sound of people talking. As he realized that his greatest find was not in a collapsed warehouse or under layers of trash, but in the living testament of collective passion and shared memory unfolding before him, a soft smile spread across his face. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and Drew found himself fully immersed in a life he once thought was permanently broken. The rescue room was full of purpose, with workbenches full with antiques that needed careful hands to bring them back to life. He didn't seek the next big auction or star in a highly watched episode anymore. Instead, he loved quiet mornings when he could show new people how to use varnish and the satisfying sound of sandpaper smoothing up old surfaces. It was a humble reminder that the real reward of salvaging isn't money or views, but the quiet change of something that was lost into something beautiful, important, and living again. He quickly worked with museums and history groups in the area to put together touring shows that brought restored antiques to school gyms, community centers, and county fairs. A cast-iron generator pulley that had been left in a Midland scrapyard shone under spotlights next to old photos showing how it was first put in place in a plant in the 1930s. A lot of kids gathered around, amazed by how heavy it was and envisioning the hands that spun it for years. As they talked about their own memories of such machinery humming when they were younger, the elders nodded wisely. These events turned into festivals of shared memory, bringing people of all ages together and reminding everyone that salvaging is about more than just things. It's about the stories they tell and the links they make between the past and the present. In the meantime, Drew started to get better. He got back in touch with his kids through peaceful family workshops. In the afternoons, parents and kids worked together to fix up basic relics, like a cracked porcelain plate or a tarnished silver spoon. As they sanded, filed, and painted side by side, laughter rang through the open bays, making new memories to replace old ones. At first, Rebecca wasn't sure, but she went to one session and watched as Drew showed their daughter how to fix up a small wooden box that their grandfather had crafted. Seeing that moment made her trust the man behind the public face again, and for the first time in years, the family felt hope rise again. Drew's effect went beyond just helping himself. Local artists said that his teaching helped bring back old techniques that were almost gone, such restoring leaded glass and forging wrought iron. One of my former students started a foundation to save old farm tools, while another founded a woodshop that focuses on eco-friendly upcycling. Regional tourism boards saw the rescue room as a cultural anchor and included workshop tours in their promotional materials. They also offered heritage passes that included visits to local museums and historic sites. He even worked with city planners to turn old industrial areas into creative districts. This shows that the salvage ethos can change both places and things. Drew's vision kept growing as he looked ahead. He planned a number of mobile salvage labs that were made from shipping containers and had all the tools and safety stations they needed so he and his crew could hold workshops anywhere, anytime. These clean pods might roll into rural areas that don't have access to cultural resources and park next to town buildings and schools. He wrote lesson plans for material science and creative reuse classes, and he worked with teachers to include salvage projects in art and history classes. The idea of finding hidden potential in things that have been ignored became a metaphor for finding potential in people. This idea resonated with individuals of all ages and from all over the world. Drew learned through all of these things that redemption was not a place to go, but a journey. The aged railway lamp that renewed his enthusiasm and the kit supply for school workshops were only two examples of items that showed how far he had come. He learned that being vulnerable, admitting past mistakes, and talking about them openly was a strong way to connect with others. He talked honestly with other craftsmen in private reflection sessions about the sale that almost broke him, the scandal that turned communities against him, and the